What if your biggest competitive edge is not just your product, but how fast you adapt to this ever-changing market? This podcast conversation makes the case. Hey friends, you are watching a brand new episode of the Green New Perspective podcast, your go-to place when you want to learn about innovative technologies that are changing our world today and discover marketing strategies that are fueling growth in this space. In today's episode, we are talking about how innovation, digitalization, and AI are impacting legacy manufacturing companies. My guest is Jon Star, Director of Marketing at Method Machine Tools, a company that's been in business since 1958. We talk about what it takes to modernize an aging industry, why digitalization can wait, and how to build a workforce that's ready for the next generation of manufacturing. Stay tuned and enjoy.
This episode of Green New Perspective is brought to you by New Perspective Marketing. For over 20 years, New Perspective has helped future-focused B2B tech companies grow by building thought leadership, attracting better qualified leads, and driving pipeline growth. If you're ready for smart strategies, measurable results, and a partner who's invested in your success, visit npws.com to learn more.
Hello, John, and welcome to the Green New Perspective podcast.
Oh, thank you, Dunya. Thank you for having me.
So for starters, can you tell us a bit more about yourself, about your role at Methods Machine, and for the listeners who might not know the company, what's the Methods story? What do you do? What sets you apart in American manufacturing?
Sure, thank you. So again, my name is Jon Star. I'm the Director of Marketing at Methods Machine Tools. We are a U.S. business based outside of Boston, Massachusetts. We've actually got a really compelling story. We are a third-generation family-owned company. Private company representing about 350 employees throughout the U.S. And what we do, we are an importer of CNC machine tools, and we also provide a portfolio of automation services. So if you're in the metalworking business, fabrication business, you're cutting parts for anything that, an auto car part to a sink faucet. We sell the machinery and provide the automation and technical support and engineering services that make manufacturing possible. We've been in business continuously since 1958, and we operate out of 7 offices around the U.S. and sell our solutions in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
So from your vantage point, what's the current state of manufacturing in the U.S. and what's shifting right now that excites you but also worries you?
It's a really interesting time in manufacturing. I've come at this from a perspective of I'm not a manufacturing lifer. I was actually in enterprise technology before joining Methods about 3.5 years ago, and really coming into the industry at a very, as I said, an interesting time. And not just because of the big macro things we hear about, right? Tariffs and, things that are disruptive. We hear lots of talk about rebirthing American manufacturing, but I think really there's, I think 2 or 3 really core challenges, but also opportunities facing manufacturing right now, right? There's really 3 things here, right? There's, changing labor force, a changing generational labor force of people that are aging out of the workforce and not enough talent pipeline behind them. There's the changing coming from technology and all the disruptive technologies that are on the verge or currently breaking through. You think about AI and all sorts of digital automation. And then there's just the cost of doing business. There's, manufacturing tends to be sort of a low margin business where in a very competitive marketplace, profitability can be a challenge. And so you've got these 3 overarching challenges coming at it at an industry that is still, I think, trying to play a lot of catch up through all the transformational waves that may have hit other industries over the last 10 to 15 years.
So manufacturing famously missed this big wave of digital transformation. So what do you think that happened and what's changed in the last decade to make modernization non-negotiable, I'd say?
Yeah, I think in the grand scheme of things, I remember digital transformation was a phrase that really, I think, came on the scene in 2011, 2012. Yeah. And I think at that time, in sort of the decade that followed, right, a lot of that transformed technology was, one, largely focused on the services industry. And when I say services, I mean things from the consumer experience. How do you make consumption of consumer products easier and mobile friendly, to also just internal customers or internal consumers of business services, right? Thinking about large enterprises where things are they're trying to get, work done faster, smarter, more intuitively. And I think largely for the traditional, at least North American manufacturing base, that was kind of out of scope for what it meant to be a manufacturer. Largely, manufacturers are focusing on winning orders, making parts, doing things at quality, and there was sort of just the tribal knowledge of doing things in their tried and true methodologies. And I think it just really was never on the mind of a lot of manufacturers. And I will say also from the outside in that a lot of manufacturing can be perceived as sort of this monolithic thing. People think about manufacturing, they think about large, long assembly lines, but the reality is the majority of domestic manufacturing in North America is done by small and medium businesses. And so I think why they missed that wave, right, is that investing in new technology was just never really viewed either as an important, a timely imperative. They were more focused on keeping their labor, remaining financially viable. And I think technology investment was a little off the radar. But I think the imperative is now coming because as we have this generational shift, we're seeing broader understanding and engagement that, adopting new technologies are not only helping businesses run smarter and provide better tools and experiences for their team members, but it's increasingly becoming clear that through intent and purpose and strong communication that adopting new technologies in manufacturing is a competitive advantage. And that's what we tell our customers, right? When we talk about things like adopting robotics and automation, that, when you have all these forces coming together at one time, how are you going to remain viable and competitive as a business? And that's where I think technology really starts to cut through and create this urgency to say, okay, we've got to look at things differently in manufacturing.
And Method was the first US importer of Japanese machine tools
That's right.
Yeah, how does that legacy influence how you approach the change today?
Yeah. I think this legacy of sort of staying ahead of the curve has been something that's always been embedded in Method's culture, going back to our founder, who was the grandfather of our current ownership. As you mentioned, we were the first company to import Japanese CNC machine tools. This is going back to the late 50s, early 60s. Fast forward into the 90s, we were one of the first companies to really adopt and lead with 5-axis machining, which is another level up in terms of the engineering and the capabilities and sort of just the machining knowledge. And then we go into the early 2000s and we really embraced automation, I think at a time when it was still perceived as almost a bad word in the industry, right? This perception that if I automate, if I have robotics, I don't need people, which we've never gone into a conversation and say, hey, if you adopt these robotics, you don't need these people. We've never looked at it that way. So I think, we've had this culture and this history of really leaning into new technologies, and we're even doing it today as we currently undergo pilot programs internally developing our own AI solution. And what it means for our own team members, and then ultimately what it may mean for our customers as we continue to prove it out internally.
And what have you learned from your internal AI tool, like the good, the bad, or the unexpected?
I think I'll start with the unexpected, actually, because we have a team that very long tenured, experienced people who've been in this industry their whole careers. And, I really say this in a genuine way. I was actually very excited to see how quickly some of even our longer time employees wanted to adopt AI, wanted to jump into this pilot. And that was really great to see because they are some of our biggest and well-known internal evangelists, and they know this industry. And so for them to raise their hands and say, yes, I want to be in the pilot was great. I think we're also learning, from an operational perspective, where are there gaps? Where are there risks? When we talk about AI, and this applies to us internally with our own pilot, but I think to the industry in manufacturing and perhaps any adopter of AI solutions moving forward, is understanding your risks, understanding your operational gaps, understanding your own information management, right? What are the processes? What are the guardrails we put around information? Because when you have these open source tools like OpenAI, et cetera, right? We're dealing with companies and we include ourselves in this, that have a lot of intellectual property, have a lot of trusted information. And so we don't want that getting out there, right? And in manufacturing, you're often dealing with parts that you're cutting under non-disclosure agreements. So like there's a lot of risk in the system. And so we're learning as we go, where do we really need to be in tune with our process, our information management? And then I think one learning I also bring in why we sort of, when we launched even our own internal pilot with our sister company, Multi-Axis, who is the owner of our AI tool, is this really is about the next generation of the manufacturing workforce too. And our learnings and what we're seeing too, right, is the understanding that the next or the incoming generation of the manufacturing workforce, they are what I would call digital native, right? This is a generation that has grown up largely attached to a device. They know where the internet is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Now AI, I mean, I have an 11-year-old and she's already building no-code applications in her schoolwork, right? Like we are in a whole new frontier when it comes to manufacturing. So when you have this incoming and ultimately growing workforce of these digital natives where technology is embedded in their everyday lives, they're already tech savvy. They're already tech forward. So the expectation is that some of this technology is already going to be offered and accessible to them. And companies that aren't at least embracing some level of next generation technology, whether it's on the manufacturing floor in the form of robotics or data analysis or using software tools for data analysis or having, a full AI approach to AI, like you've got to start somewhere, because in manufacturing, again, going back to the labor skill gap and also going back to this imperative in North America where, right, like we want to regrow and rebirth manufacturing, technology is going to have to lead the way, because there is not going to be a one-for-one talent swap of when somebody retires, that person's going to be replaced by the next generation. Like the math just isn't there. So how is the technology going to help us close that gap so this industry can grow?
Yeah, you mentioned the workforce challenges quite a few times by now. So what does it look like for you on the ground, like attracting young talent, keeping them engaged, and upskilling your existing team?
Yeah. It's first, it can't just be siloed, right? Like this for us internally is as we look at it from a talent development perspective, it's all hands on deck across departments, because, if you look at the big picture and the macro, right, we grow manufacturing not just by how much stuff we make, but how much, knowledge can we put across every department. And so we approach it as one, communication is critical. Having a strategic plan that is communicated, that shows the type of talent you're looking for, but then also the steps you take to nurture that talent, to develop talent, to reward talent, and give, the younger generation, the next generation, a real understanding of what career pathing looks like in, let's say, just say in our world in manufacturing. Now, for us, that includes, we work with a lot of local vocational schools and engineering schools to foster a pipeline. I mean, we're actively doing it. We're working with a local school this week, co-sponsoring their career fair. They are an engineering school that has over the years been a real source of talent for us. And so we go there showing, hey, not only are there pathways for engineering, but there's pathways for other opportunities too. Sales, technical service, finance, so all these roles that people don't think about, that manufacturing does need beyond just those engineers who are on the floor. And so, I think there's been this, a little bit of a misguided perception of manufacturing, and sort of think about it through this conversation I had once with a high school teacher who came to one of our events, and he said, our biggest struggle is not convincing necessarily students all the time, it's also convincing parents, right? That parents can say, I want my kid to get into the trade because yes, there's not only financial opportunity, but there is career opportunity and fulfillment opportunity. And again, having come from outside manufacturing into this world, which was very different for me, and I had to learn a lot quickly, but to be able to operate in a world where you see, smell, feel things and creating things is quite energizing. And I think that's what needs to be shown more about manufacturing.
We mentioned that Method has a history of leading with innovation, but communicating that value, especially now with AI and automation, can be
Yeah.
tough. So how do you make this advanced solution tangible to buyers?
Sure. I think, one, in our media ecosystem right now, right, like there's so much information out there and attention spans are shorter and shorter that how you get from A to B on a just kind of putting my marketing brain on, right? How you get from A to B from like a value proposition and how can you do it in the shortest, snappiest way possible? That's from like the inside, looking from inside out. But for us internally, it was a lot of what I just communicated in terms of being transparent and sharing, right? As we go through our own internal transformation with some of these tools, we're running our own internal focus groups. We're doing company all internal communications, proving results, showing how different people in different functions and different roles are using technologies to help themselves, but also help our customers. In this case, right, we started our pilot with our national technical service desk because we said these are the people who are the closest to our customers. These actually might be some of our what we were perceive as our early resistors to technology, but when we show them, hey, as we intelligently think about how we manage our customer information, one of our service techs, if you're manning the phone, the customer support phone on the national desk, and what if we could help solve your problem of I want to resolve our customer's challenge within 30 minutes, right? Rather than it take an hour or 2 hours as I go through manuals and documentation, right? What if we were able to say, we could help you solve a customer's challenge perhaps within minutes, just through keystrokes through our AI tool that we're developing. And looking outward with all of our solutions, even our core products on the machine tool side, it's, how do you differentiate in a way that's different than what people have come to expect, right? Which in manufacturing with CNC machine tools is, well, how fast does it move? What are the certain pedigree elements of your machine? And I say this even today, we launched a new campaign focused on our automation solutions that really removed the technical attributes of our machine. And what we did was we actually humanized them and said, you're trying to run lights out manufacturing 24 hours a day, manufacturing when there's no human element involved at all. But how do you do it in a way that really connects to people? And so we looked at it and said, let's humanize them. Let's give our solutions personalities. Looking at it as a way to say, maybe that's a way to break through, right? So that's showing that we're thinking differently. And I think in manufacturing at large, there's just a lot of room for thinking differently. And this is an area where it's very competitive, but I think for the industry in total, there's a lot of collaboration that could still be had, I think, even amongst competitors, as there is this element of like rising tide lifts all boats. So that's really how we look at it, is just, finding ways to differentiate products in creative ways, and then, really leaning into storytelling and showing, proven value quickly.
And do you feel that buyers are still thinking analog, or are they open for new solutions more and more?
I think in our industry, there's really, and not to sort of try to thread the needle on your question, but I think there are two distinct cohorts of people, right? You have today, I think about the persona work we do in marketing, right? But like, I think about maybe the shop owner, right? Who run his shop for several decades. And yes, that person, may be very keen still on physical literature and wanting to feel things and look at things. But we also know that, there are team members on the shop owner's floor who are, when they've got their 5-10 minute break, they're learning from scrolling TikTok or Instagram or what have you, right? So, and this is actually an internal, I guess, a question I've had with my own colleagues internally is, how do we make sure we address both?
Yeah.
Because they're both valuable. They both impact decision-making, right? The shop owner may be the person that is signing off on the purchase order, but that team member on the floor could have a very influential role to play in terms of saying, hey, boss, look what I just saw on social media. We got to consider this because it's going to help us be smarter, more efficient. So I would say the shift is kind of in process, where I think all marketers in our industry are still kind of juggling both.
I'm asking this because even when I'm talking to people who are in innovative tech companies, they also have the similar situation to
Yeah.
yours, which is surprising to me. You would kind of expect when you have some innovative tech or software that people would turn to digital marketing
Yeah.
for, like you've mentioned, storytelling, explanation, etc. But some of them are still doing events
Right.
because people want to, have something tangible
Right. Yeah.
before.
And we do all of that under the sun,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we still, in the 3.5 years or so I've been with the company, we've made a lot of progress in terms of digitizing our marketing platforms, right? Like leveraging the power of certain CRMs. But we still have events in our physical locations because we sell physical product, right? I spent a little bit of time in the software world where on the marketing side, there's a lot of sizzle, flash, a lot of great creative, but ultimately you're selling software. We're selling machine tools and automation where to this day, a lot of our success is, can I get somebody in our building to see our product so that they can hear? I mean, because our customer base really is even down to, they want to hear how a machine sounds when it's running. Right. So it's a very interesting and dynamic time for marketers in this industry because we have to cover all bases. And that is a huge challenge. Industrial marketing is, I would say, not for the weak-willed.
Where do you see messaging fall apart between marketing and sales? Or
I
do
think
you?
it's no, I do. No, I definitely do because I do. I love our sales guys, but I definitely run into that at times. I think a lot of it is, making that connection to the voice of the customer, right? I'm sitting in our Boston area headquarters. Yes, I travel to our offices and try to do ride-alongs and visit customers as much as I can. But our field sales reps, they're in there every day. So being able to extract that voice of the customer is so critical, right? Because it might only come in a one-sentence soundbite where you could have I do customer interviews where I sit on a Zoom with them for 30 minutes, but it could be one line that they didn't even realize that they had said where I go, that's the hook, right? And so getting that field alignment around the voice of the customer and what really moves the customer. Yes, it's, the sticker price on our machines is one thing. Certainly technical service and support is paramount. But what is it that really gets them to go from consideration to intent? And that's where we try to plug the gap, right? From, campaigns and creative and messaging. But for me, our sales team is my biggest and most important stakeholder because I'm here to help them, right? I'm here to be wind in their sails, pardon the pun.
And what would you say that changed about the modern buyer's journey? I expect, because you're selling expensive machines, that the sales cycle is long.
Yeah.
So how are you adapting to nurture trust over months or years?
Yeah. That's a really great question because we do see it. I mean, it's in all the demand that we capture, all the leads that come to our website and all the form fills that marketers are always pursuing. It is still more common that an opportunity will take 3 months, 6 months, 9, because we're dealing with high cost capital equipment. And so what I think has changed is, really understanding your data, your performance data, and are you able to visualize that in a way that you're almost seeing a story told back to you from your own data. And so for us, it's, making sure we're responding to every really valid touch point. Somebody downloads an asset off our website, somebody, visits one of our facilities. And so really all we're trying to do is ultimately, if we think about it in CRM terms, right, you've got your 20 percenters and you've got your 80 percenters. How can we nurture these people through a journey that gets them from 20% I'm lukewarm to 80%, okay, I'm ready to buy? And that's everything, showing them everything, right? Showing them creative and video and customer success stories, showing them service metrics to reinforce the quality of technical service, which is ultimately your biggest selling point, right? Sales sells the first solution, service sells everything else after that. And so just making sure you're present and then making sure for us, we're arming our sales teams with the right information and that communication is strong so that they are then able to be sort of our voice in the field. And, really making sure that we're putting content out there that, again, at least is helping them move to a conclusion, right? So that our sales reps can have that conclusion one way or another, win or lose.
Did you know your win rate drops by 90% if a deal sits idle for 2 months? Sales cycles are dragging. Buyers go silent. Decision makers keep multiplying. This 20-minute webinar shares data-backed insights and clear tactics to revive momentum fast and keep it going. Don't let your best opportunities stall out. Watch on demand, link in the episode description, and take back control of your pipeline.
And you have different type of partnerships as far as I've seen. Other manufacturers, engineering service providers, or companies that build custom automation. So do you need to adapt or adjust your digital marketing strategies for each of them?
Historically, it was a lot of physical literature, in person, trade shows, that sort of thing. But I mean, we see it. I mean, we see it now. I would say most of our traffic is digital. Most of our traffic, most of our interest is sourced through digital engagement. Whether somebody came through a YouTube link or came from a YouTube video that linked off to our website or from a QR code that might have been stuck on the side of the machine. Being able to, I think, connect the different threads of how someone can access you digitally and how can you kind of show up in all these different touch points is that challenge, right? And so for us, it's measuring and weighing what are our best sort of just pathways to getting eyeballs. And I think any marketer or any industry is facing that right now.
Yeah, we mentioned a couple of times why modernization matter. But what do you think, how does smart tech connect to building a more sustainable and resilient manufacturing base in the US?
I think from the technology side, right, the tools we use to sell, to market, I think what it can do is really leave a digital trail for a company. I think in manufacturing historically, right, there's so much tribal knowledge, but that tribal knowledge can be gone the second a team member leaves for another opportunity. So what is that record? What is the history of customer projects, internal processes, even pitfalls, right? You have a security incident, etc. Having a strong sales tech stack, a strong MarTech stack leaves those digital fingerprints that leaves a history for how companies operate. And I think that really does build a sense of resiliency. I mean, going back to where we started with digital transformation. I mean, this company Methods absolutely went through it over the last 10 years, adopting full sales tech from the CRM side, which you go back to 2008 or so. I mean, we didn't have it. So now we have a long tail of customer information. Now, us as the service provider, it's important, right? Because we're selling goods that people want to consume. But even for those small and medium-sized manufacturing businesses, it's equally critical. This is a very contested labor market. And if your machinist who maybe worked for you for 5 years or 10 years left for a different role, are you sure you have a record of everything that person worked on? Is that shop owner going to wake up one day and go, oh boy, I better find Jim because we've got something similar and I don't know what my next step is. And this is a little bit of what ties into the AI solution we're working on, right? So that if and when we do bring it to market, what we're talking about is creating a private digital environment where, again, directly at small and medium businesses, we're looking at how can we help those customers create a knowledge management base for themselves so that their own businesses are more resilient. Even down to, I've got product failure, I've got team members leaving. There's a whole bunch of opportunities where technology can build resiliency through strong, disciplined knowledge management.
And we've seen a lot of change in manufacturing. I mean, not just in manufacturing. It turns out like the change is the only constant.
Yeah.
In that kind of environment, what gives you hope for the future? And what advice would you give to, let's say, a 30-person shop just starting its modernization journey?
Yeah. I mean, I think what excites me is that, people, when I sort of look at the big picture of the workforce and technology, right? I think because manufacturing, I think, is sort of almost that last vanguard of an industry that really does have a transformation underway, that the long results that maybe we don't see today will end up bearing so much fruit for, local economies, national economies, but also talent. And I think, my personal opinion, and I'm saying this as my own personal opinion, not necessarily not for Methods. I'll put that caveat in there. But, this focus on 4-year liberal arts degree, and I say this as someone with a 4-year liberal arts degree, I think we almost over-rotated too much on that over the last few decades. And I think, I see it on our own team where folks that are a few years out of school are really in an opportune place to have career impact in a way because this industry is so starved for it. So I think from the people perspective, there's huge opportunity. I think from the technology perspective, I think what's changing is that, as I mentioned, I think companies and businesses are really seeing it through the lens of competitive advantage and business resiliency, business profitability. What may have led to hesitation in the past of the adoption of robotics and software tools. In this industry, there is pride, significant pride in the fact that a lot of manufacturers are family owned and have been handed down over generations. And you want to protect that. And one way to protect that is by being more open-minded to adopting technologies that make you more profitable, more intelligent in your processes, and more resilient. And I think for manufacturing to succeed, it's no longer a nice to have. It is a business imperative, and it's here now. And I think the industry, IMTS is the international manufacturing show that happens every 2 years. This was my second time going through it this past fall, and I can't wait to see what 2026 looks like, because I think we're going to see even more AI, more automation, more software, because that's where this industry is going. But it will always be foundationally, I think, underpinned by fantastic human talent. So it's a very exciting time.
And what would you say about marketers who are joining this manufacturing workforce?
I would say there is a lot of opportunity to be creative. And I think, again, it's one of these lanes for people who maybe were not in manufacturing to come in and make an impact. Because this industry has also had to rethink how it does marketing. As we mentioned, the talk of trade shows and physical brochures, etc. To be able to bring that knowledge and that skill and that competence to bear in manufacturing as a marketer, communications professional, graphic designer, artistic direction, so much opportunity, and it can only be supported by AI tools, which I use today. But yeah, definitely, a definite career pathway there for marketers and communicators as well.
Well, thank you, John. This has been amazing. Thank you for
thank
being
you,
my
Dunya.
guest here. Thank you for tuning in to Green New Perspective. This podcast is proudly sponsored by New Perspective. We are a Boston-based marketing agency working with Cleantech clients solely for over 20 years now. And if you want to check out how we help our Cleantech clients to grow, you can click on the link in the description of this episode. If you like what we do here with the podcast, giving some amazing people from all over the clean tech space a place where they can showcase their innovative tech aimed at combating climate change, you can support us in so many ways. You can leave reviews, comments, or consider subscribing to our channel on your favorite streaming platform. We've noticed that around 75% of you who are regularly watching our show are not subscribing. So just by hitting that subscribe button, you could help us to grow, to get even more people from the climate tech space and create additional content. So please consider doing that. Thank you in advance. And of course, thank you for tuning in to this episode, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.